Well, there are many different ideas about what telecommunications are going to be in the future.
All human knowledge, like the universe, are these digital programs, and they're shimmering, and you can change them, and you can move into them.
We expect one universe of reading and writing and film and audio that we will all be able to explore, and we pay as we go, each piece. I want to get an ice cream cone. Can I buy you an ice cream cone?
Hypertour 89 was a knowledge expedition organized by Magnetic Press to help its participants understand the development of a new paradigm for storing, exchanging, and using information, hypermedia. The tour met with some of the best minds working in this field. This tape is a synopsis of what we learned.
This person tries to solve that problem, this person tries to solve that problem, and so you have this mess with each piece of software solving different parts of the problem and not being able to fit together. And this can't go on. We cannot go on having incompatible software of thousands of different kinds that have to be learned, each to use a different, you have to learn to use each program separately. It doesn't work. And by using the Xanadu data structure and form of linkage, we have a way to tie together everything at last.
Nelson is the first theorist of knowledge. And for 28 years, he's been totally alone out there. Everyone knows that he's good, but so what? But then in the last 3 years, the Macintosh HyperCard came along, and now Autodesk has bought 80% of his software rights to Xanadu. And suddenly, after 29 years, he's recognized, and he's first time he's ever made any money.
So that's the expectation, that we can have a unifying world of data, like the landscape you see here, and the individual computers are windows to this landscape.
So what is hypermedia? Apple, I don't think, has ever published a pronouncement on what this is. So where I work, we think of it as just transparent access to everything, to every kind of information that's out there that someone might want to get at, or look at, or hear, or whatever the range of available data types might be. And it's and it is an environment that not only supports the finding of this stuff, the retrieval of it, but it supports the environment in which you see it presented to you. It's control over how you do that searching, and it's being able to take the information once you get it back and do something with it if you so desire.
I'm actually going to stop back and say what I think about what is hypermedia. Okay, and I know you've already gone and talked to Ted. So I'm going to take my life in my hands here and interpret what he said. When he originally talked about hypertext, and if you pin him down and say, all right, Ted, what's hypertext? The minimal definition is basically what he calls non-sequential reading and writing. Okay, well, what's really the essence of that?
Non-sequential writing is anything that does not involve going from page 2 to page 3 to page 4. And so there's lots of people who are advertising that they have hypertext now, and they're all telling the truth, because it doesn't take very much to do hypertext. The table of contents in a book is hypertext because it gives you access into the book without going from page 2 to page 3 to page 4. It allows you to leap to different locations. Now on a computer, a very simple form of hypertext on a computer is if you put the table of contents out here, you don't need page numbers anymore, because you can just simply point at the chapter that you're interested in, click and go to it.
It's addressability of information and connectivity of information, getting from one place to another, knowing where you're at and where you came from.
What you do is you say, well, I want to start a link here, and then you go trudging through your system until you find the place where you want the link to end, and you say, I want the link to end here. Mm-hmm. Well, if it was easy to get from the one place to the other place, you wouldn't be installing a link, okay? By definition, it is hard to install a link like that.
And what's hypermedia? Okay, well, that's going the next level. Okay, isn't just text, it's other elements of media in there too. Okay, so that's sort of grunt level. All right, if a system has got this in some permutation, you could probably say it's at least got a class of hypermedia functionality. Okay, that's baseline.
What are the parts? What are the parts of the thing? And we split it up arbitrarily into 4 areas. There's the information itself, which may be resident locally. It may be out spread around the world. It may be on a computer somewhere else or some other kind of device. There is a transfer system to get at it. And it's sort of software protocols and hardware layers. It's the wires that let you get at the thing, whether they're telephone lines or SCSI device wires or whatever they are. And then locally, there's a retrieval portion, where you've got some piece of software, whatever it may be, that goes out and hunts for the stuff at your request. And then there's a presentation portion where you see it coming to you, whatever it may be. Ideally, the user has control over large portions of those 4 items. At minimum, they probably have control over the first 3. They may not have any control over where the data lives or how it's managed, okay, that information. But they should be able to control, to a large extent, how it's presented, how it's retrieved, and the physical layer by which it's transported from its home location.
Ideally, the first 3 should contribute to the 4th being transparent.
Yeah, ideally, users do not have to deal with anything beyond the orders, in essence, that they issue to the machine.
They shouldn't have to care where.
They shouldn't have to care where it is. They shouldn't care whether it's on in my opinion, they shouldn't care whether it's on a VCR, a video disc player, a 3090 mainframe, a hard disk, a tape backup, a TAR 9-track monster tape running on a back somewhere. They shouldn't have to care about that. They should say, I need to know about X, or I'm interested in X, or gee, I'd like to go poking around in X, and wander off and do it.
There are new languages that are going to be spoken very soon about all this that have to be understood so that someone can build some lexical information so that people who weren't literally in the thick of it can find their way around. Someone's got to build maps simultaneously as this territory is built.
It's all maps, absolutely.
Right.
You're absolutely
and
right.
You've got these new territories,
You use the right word there. That's the $5 million word, map.
This is the first time, as far as I can tell, that the territories are actually being fabricated, are being generated. And it makes the mapping a much more interesting problem. Nelson is shipping, thanks to Autodesk in part, is shipping Xanadu in November. Is it incorrect to say that what you're trying to do is apply that particular product and products like it to the world of formal institutional learning?
Oh, a formal institutional.
Well, formal.
We're turning the classroom, instead of a place where it's brick and stone and there's a professor and there's a chalkboard and there's lectures and like that, we're turning the classroom into an interactive digital laboratory or performance laboratory. The name of one of our courses is called Interscreen, and this is a way of communicating. It's multilingual, which means that the professor can design, types in the instead of lecturing, he prepares the program for the next day class in any language. And that's very important in America now because in Los Angeles, 50% of the children in first grade do not speak English. We have a book called Huckleberry Finn. It's a big, wonderful American book. The students can decide which picture of Huckleberry Finn they want. You can have Huckleberry Finn and have him black, You can have Huckleberry Finn be a girl. You can have him be Jewish or anything you want. Why are we limited? Now, still, you have the original Huckleberry Finn, who was a white boy with bare foot. That's all right. We're not changing that.
But can you imagine the power for a kid if they're reading the American classics and like Huckleberry Finn, they see themselves going through all the adventures and so forth. And they can put their friends in and so forth. Boy, that's going to have a lot of power as far as kids really getting more involved with the story and having a deeper grasp of what's going on. They can put themselves in as Washington crossing the Delaware.
Or you can not cross the Delaware.
Or you can not cross the Delaware and see what would
Napoleon,
happen.
before he went to Waterloo, Josephine said, Napoleon, let's go down to the island and take the weekend off and make love. Okay, he didn't go to Waterloo. Therefore, there was no Battle of Waterloo.
And see what
But you have to know history. See, we're not depreciating the book. We don't want to eliminate books, but they can appreciate it more if they can use it as a source rather than as a Bible.
Sure.
Would it be fair to say that the way you're approaching the development of your courseware is treating software as a process and not as a goal?
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that it never finishes. The software is as much a living thing as the knowledge it represents or the data it manipulates.
The idea is that the students in any one class will be working with a textbook and an author, but they'll have their own version of it, which will be included. The best student responses will be available and included in the next versions of it, so that the student is going to be making money. A good student can make maybe $100 to $200 by giving good responses, which which other classes use. Now this totally blows away the formal institution. Our idea is, see, the black kid in the ghetto is going down, he's got this, and he's got that, like that, and none of this.
Right.
None of that. No,
He's got his cyber box.
Exactly. And you plug
play
it
it
into
loud.
a telephone, you plug it into the TV.
That'd make a great artwork. I
Hey,
can
yeah,
just see
hey, yeah.
carrying the laptop up on his shoulder.
Yeah, right, yeah. Plus you can have rap, you can have good music, stereophonic, with earphones, your stereophonic sound. Professors don't like it when I say this. I say, the professor in the future is not going to be this wise person. There's a baseball team called the Los Angeles Dodgers, and there's a coach called Tommy Lasorda. Do you know who he is? He's a big fat guy, and he can motivate them. I said, yeah, the teacher is not going to be this wise person. He's going to be like Tommy Lasorda. Hey, that's good. Come on, like that. Hey, try this. Hey, that's good. The stars of the classroom are like the star players, and the teacher's like a coach. There's no more formal institution. You're never going to get these kids back into the classroom. Forget it.
The trouble with the CD-ROM business is it creates a wall at the boundary of each disk. You see, the boundaries of the disk should not be relevant, and yet the CD-ROM industry, the way Bill Gates is trying to create it, they're making each disk into a unit and making its boundaries significant, and they should not be significant. It's just storage. So, in a way, the competition of Xanadu is the whole CD-ROM industry. The people who expect individual platters to be sold, we expect one universe of reading and writing and film and audio that we will all be able to explore, and we pay as we go, each piece. Of course, you can keep whatever you like because you've already paid for it.
True hypermedia requires a multimedia hardware platform, a workstation which can indifferently manage text, audio, video, and graphics information. While systems such as the Apple Macintosh and the Commodore Amiga have incorporated multimedia design concepts from their inception, no PC-compatible computers integrated these features, until Fujitsu introduced the FM Towns.
We're pretty much the first Japanese computer bold enough to come to US and introduce a new concept computer, sort of like what Commodore when they introduced Amiga, sort of like that. But it's a powerful computer. It's a 386-based computer, and it's 32 on the 32-bit native mode. Can run MS-DOS applications. We could have shown MS-DOS applications, but why?
Now, metaphor in computer interfaces, it really gets my goat because I think it's such nonsense. It leads to crap like the Macintosh.
That the Mac interface is great, and you need consistency. You need sort of these landmarks and milestones so that people can find their way around. It's like having traffic signs. I mean, if every city had its own design for traffic signs, how would you know where the heck you were as you crossed borders?
They do this absurd mapping of a reasonable set of concepts into this dumb thing. The worst example, of course, the example for which someone should be hanged is the garbage can in the Macintosh, which means either destroy or save, depending on the circumstances.
So you buy that. The Mac interface provides that. The user interface guidelines, the amount of evangelism we do with developers to make that happen.
You've got the bird's nest and the high-buttoned shoe and the anvil and the forceps and the frying pan all on the screen at once, and trying to remember what each one does.
The neat part about HyperCard is when there's a more appropriate interface, it lets people craft that, fit it to the task and to fit it to the information. You can hopefully have a little bit of design sense in terms of interface and graphics.
These designer twits have thought, oh, good, we'll have the high-button shoe do this, and then what else will we pack into this high-button shoe concept? Well, I guess, the heel could represent this and the toe could so in other words, we're going
to... so that it doesn't turn into a muck. I mean, there's nothing that prevents you from running a muck, for better or worse, but it does let you adapt to the task.
Let 100 flowers bloom. The hypertext world is for everybody.
Hypermedia is not a product. You can't buy it. No one's going to make it. It's a lot of stuff coalescing. In an environment, whatever the workstation may be, whatever the personal computer may be, whatever the hardware looks like, whatever the software looks like, it's an environment that supports a certain level of human activity, period. But there are parts that have to be created to make it work. Okay? Reading is a lovely thing. You can't do it without a book, and you can't make a book without a printing press, and you can't do it without paper and ink, etc. So the parts have to exist before you can engage in that wonderful activity.
HyperCard, I don't know if you're not all familiar with it, is Apple's product they're giving away free, which has created an incredible sort of cottage industry, both on pressed CD-ROMs and on magnetic disks, of stackware, just data with links built in. And this is sort of an idea of smart information where everyone has this engine available to trace through the knowledge embedded in a database.
HyperCard is something that somebody had the guts to put into popular distribution, John Scully in this case. Okay? So people for years have done research on rich document architectures and extensible software, and and for years we've been playing with the idea of programmability by people. We've been playing with more open architectures for operating systems. So HyperCard is something that finally came together enough that somebody like John Scully and Bill Atkinson get together and say, why don't we throw this out there and see what happens?
And real people can now play with it. Artists, teachers, people that have something to say.
Well, our general strategy is just to keep extending HyperCard and adding to our basic tool set so that people can develop HyperCard applications in various media, not just CD-ROM, but video, full range, sound, animation.
We got a group of 25 people who crank HyperCard out. And we get help from Tim, we get help from other people as we go along. And that's the idea. It's most personal. But when somebody gets their first automobile, okay, or when they're learning to drive it, they usually don't get every option or every choice. I mean, most kids don't learn to drive in a Corvette or a completely customized automobile. They usually learn in something that's pretty basic. They get a feel for it, they get their skills built, they get their confidence built, and that's particularly important. And then you can say, okay, you're in charge, put the mags on it, paint it red, do whatever you want. That's what it's all about with HyperCard, really. And HyperCard provides a simple set of metaphors, ideally a simple conceptual framework to let people move into that world.
At the CD-ROM conference, we've introduced a new toolkit to add CD audio capabilities to HyperCard. What this means is from within HyperCard environment, you can access audio tracks on your CD-ROM, in your CD-ROM drive. It works with any drive that uses the Apple driver. Okay, so it would work with additional drives that would support the Apple driver. The thing that's important about this is it has control down to 1/75th of a second. It's a very fine control of audio tracks, and it can work with mixed data disks. So it can be a combination of audio, visual, data, whatever you want to have on your CD. Okay?
How about HyperSource? What role is that going to play?
Well, HyperSource is, again, just another tool. It was actually developed for use internally initially, and we realized that other customers would want this. It's a sophisticated retrieval engine for working with graphical databases, and it allows HyperCard to work with other file formats, such as PICT, EPSF, etc. And again, we're looking at extending the product in ways, but our basic strategy is we want to give our core users the basic functionality with performance is our key watchword, and then give people ways to extend into other areas where they want more functionality for their particular application. Instead of giving people a Swiss Army knife where they might give up some things for the basic performance, we want to give them a really solid product, part of our platform, part of our operating system that they can add to. That's our basic strategy.
And they found that hypertext documentation online is the best way to organize the documentation. They just had a big war at IBM over this subject, and one of the vice presidents quit and went to Apple. Yes, they were creating, they have a standard for applications for their mainframes called SAA, Systems Application Architecture. And there was a group that wanted to have hypertext documentation online, which would not follow the hierarchical model that was built into SAA. And the upper management at IBM said, you must follow the hierarchical model, and they took their presentation all the way to the top, and so several people, at least this vice president, quit and went to Apple. So many interesting things are continuing to happen.
HyperDoc from Jessie, or now HyperDoc Inc., is a DOS-based product. It supports excellent graphics through the use of an American-made graphics software library called MetaWindow. The Jessie might run into some problems when they try to port HyperDoc to OS/2 or even to Windows, because MetaWindow is a much richer graphics environment than Windows or the OS/2 Presentation Manager can ever provide.
HyperDoc can import information from a range of devices and sources typical of desktop publishing systems. Data can be stored on optical storage devices such as CD-ROMs, write-once, and erasable optical disks. It can also fetch data from mainframe databases, tape drives, or the PC's own local storage and input devices. Input of still images via scanner or imported CAD files allow the creation of multimedia databases.
How serious was the suggestion that you may develop a front end for Xanadu out of Hyperdoc?
Oh, I think that we're certainly going to look at it. I do think that we are philosophically sympathetic in certain areas, granularity of linkules and so forth. And I do think of ourselves more as a front-end process and then more as a back-end process. Our line may be fuzzier than most because I think we tend to do some back-end things. But yes, we're going to be one of their beta sites. We're going to receive their package hopefully here in the next 30 days and begin to work with it. And I would hope that when they announce their product this fall, we will have a compatible front end.
As Woody Allen says, posterity is the religion of the intellectuals. I'm a New York, bleeding heart, liberal, movie/book lover. And my religion is posterity, meaning creating fine works and understandings to pass on to other people that are disseminated in these forms or forms somewhat like them. So Xanadu is a system for creating new forms, more general, but very much in the literary model of linkage, transclusion, posterity, heritage. Yeah.
The things that make Xanadu really striking are its ability to handle information pools that are unbounded in size, the ability to build very flexible different kinds of links, and the ability to do version control. Since the original focus of Xanadu was to build the World Library, they spent a great deal of time in those early years figuring out how to guarantee that no matter how large the information pool grew, you would be able to get very rapid access and update of information. So Xanadu has gone through 4 generations of algorithms, and at this point we can now mathematically guarantee rapid access. Okay. No matter how large, how complex your pool grows.
Xanadu is the opposite paradigm from databases.
Because it allows me to...
Databases are virtual file cards that you riffle with queries.
Right.
Xanadu are virtual documents held together by colored yarn that stretches across from anything to anything else indefinitely. And as such, it's it's intrinsically very simple. Anybody can learn to use it. We're talking about having a roadshow of workstations and several children to explain it.
We do both very fine-grained and very large-grained links. So you can run a link from an object as small as a single byte to an object as large as the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Links have an intrinsic direction. Okay. You know, the type 75 link goes from left to right, let's say. And that has some semantics that is user-defined. Okay, so, but the point is you can read it bidirectionally wherever it is. And the same for transclusion.
Now the next thing that we allow is we allow you to attach sensors to various objects, documents, documents being one of the kinds of objects that you can attach sensors to in the information pool, such that if somebody attaches a link to that object or makes a modified version of the object, you are instantly alerted. A very simple example of why that might be interesting is that suppose you had just written a document that proves that your corporation has to make a certain decision or else lose $1 million. Okay, somebody else comes along and reads that document and attaches a link to it saying, hey, you know what, that's wrong for the following reason. Okay, but either because he's too busy or because he doesn't like you, he doesn't bother to send you an email message about the fact that he has attached this devastatingly powerful refutation to your document. Well, you desperately want to know that he did that. Okay, so what you would do is you would attach a sensor to this document, and every time somebody attached a link to that document of the type refutation, you would instantly be alerted to it.
Excuse me, what kind of protocol are you now making?
It's called the FEBE protocol.
FEBE.
F-E-B-E, front end to back end.
and that basically is the way that you inquire from the back. You would ask what's in the back end and follow the connections in it.
Are those specifications and definitions going to be put out in the public domain?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the idea, if
I don't know if we're going to copyright Phoebe or not.
Okay. So the idea here is kind of like Phillips and the cassette.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we copyright Phoebe, the entire purpose of copywriting it will be to make sure that there are no nearby variations.
How are you going to get the data all over into Xanadu? Is that something that you guys will do?
We're not going to do any of it. The point is that we're creating an empty vessel and expecting the motivation of users to do this and do a lot of it.
One of my observations about the big philosophical problem of, well, how are we going to get all of the information in the Library of Congress interlinked? One of my comments is, we double the amount of information on this planet every 10 years. So if we had a hypermedia system tomorrow and people started just put the new things in and interlink to those, in 20 years, the entire Library of Congress would be a small fraction of the stuff that's online. I mean, it just simply becomes, how much of the stuff that was on clay tablets was ever translated to paper?
So where do you see Xanadu being in 5 years?
Well, where I hope it will be with let's say, 500,000 part-time users around the world, available through telephone and other popular networks, and with 1 million documents, most of them small, available with royalty, as well as, of course, some larger works, although the larger publishers will be the last to come on board because they all think they know it.
Do you see educational institutions getting involved with this, students linking into Xanadu?
Certainly, but I'm not sure what the linkage will be at the institutional level, because institutions tend to be inflexible. On the other hand, there are those around me who think they have more promise than I'm disposed to see. Such as libraries, for example, in Europe are thought to have great potential to linking here. And I just wrote off the libraries long ago, except as repositories for the physical objects, the paper objects. And it's very important that somebody take care of those. But it would be very appropriate if the libraries could offer Xanadu access. And I see a chain of Xanadu stands around the country in 5 years, 200.
Assuming that we're as successful as I expect us to be, 5 years from now there will be a very healthy third-party marketplace in automatic linking systems. That people in AI will come out with increasingly more powerful pattern recognition, semantics analysis kinds of systems. Will go perusing through the information pool, will find things that are related even though they don't have any keywords in common, and will either propose to human beings or automatically install links between those things.
Do you know if anything's been done along those lines at the present time?
All different kinds of people have come in and talked to us, including people who are into artificial intelligence.
The whole world will see Xanadu as the model of literature and writing and posterity and storage within 12 years.
Where is all this going? Okay, this is a risky one, but in terms of even things I've seen at the show, I believe even more strongly that the way this is going is cyberspace. The idea of a three-dimensional, non-restrictive user interface where you have full graphical representation of all the information you may want.
And first off, the term was borrowed from Gibson's books, Neuromancer and the like, cyberpunk, if you would. The idea that there is a explicitly spatial metaphor where people come together. Okay, and he called this consensual reality or hallucination cyberspace. And in his descriptions, at least, it's got this nice sort of hard-edged crystalline view to it. It seems to be a very geometric space.
What are some of the trends that are pointing to that? Well, you have DVI, which literally brings full motion, at least 3D appearance in the form of video, to the PC. Intel announced the plans for a micro-channel DVI card by the end of this year. That's a very significant step towards making very sophisticated graphics available to everyone.
Okay, once you have made the leap to being able to have a graphic behind which is hidden information in many different directions. It's very easy then to build entire virtual worlds wherein the information is has a graphic in front of it that makes it very natural and easy for a human being to remember where things are.
You might have heard of the development of the data glove, which is the first 3D pointing device. You actually wear this glove. It has fibers that trace the movement of your hand, and you can literally move through a three-dimensional environment and pick things up and manipulate them and so on. It's considerably more sophisticated than a touch screen, both in the way it's designed and what it lets you do.
Naturally, the first wave of colonists to cyberspace, Cyberia as we call it, are going to create their own little New Englands and New Yorks and New Havens and Montreals and so forth. And then the next versions will come along, we'll be expanding it.
We have some interference, interesting interference from that. I don't know if it's from that or what. But
Oh, it's these magnetics. They're magnetic tracking sensors, and they're putting out some pretty powerful magnetic fields. Enough so it's screwing up my nervous system a little bit, being in this room too much. I think I'm joking. Really, I'm serious.
No, I don't think you're joking. I just think it's funny.
Yeah, there's something amusing about it, right? It handicaps a person so they can no longer walk, but then once they perfect the technology, they don't have to anymore, right? It's just a bit of a race to get it done. I don't know what William told you about cyberspace, but this is what we have so far after a couple of months of working on it. The idea, as I can see it, why I'm doing it is to try to get a better integration of a person with a machine, because at the moment the metaphor that we use to interact with computers are to have a computer which is kind of like this aquarium sitting there on a desk in front of you, and there's this magical, powerful world inside there, but you're not allowed very good access to it. You have to deal with it symbolically through language, through typing, which isn't a very high bandwidth sort of thing. So suppose we could turn the computer inside out, and instead of having the computer as this little object in the world with this very narrow portal that we have to go through to get to it, suppose it were all around us, viscerally surrounding us. Suppose that as we turned our heads, we saw the world generated by the computer. As we moved our body moved around in the computer's world. And as we reached out and touched things, just like we do with objects in the real world, they would move and be manipulated either directly or through the computer's control. So this is implications for CAD, which is, I suppose, why Autodesk is paying me to sit here and do this. It also has implications for entertainment and a number of other fields. It's very seminal in the sense that the graphics technology and processors are just barely fast enough to begin to do this at an affordable level, although the technology for flight simulators and things like that has been around for many years. But I guess the reason one is going to see a large increase in the popularity and publicity about these matters of artificial reality is because the technology is becoming cheap enough so that, just like nuclear fusion, you can do it at home in your kitchen. This thing is a PC with a whole bunch of slots in it, 20 slots. It's a 386 machine, 20 megahertz card. The graphics that we're doing on these screens, which I'll show a bit more of in a second, are being done by Matrox boards. It's a solid modeling board that we're using in this rendering loop to drive it pretty fast. They're capable of about 6,000 Gerard shaded polygons per second, but we're not quite getting that speed because of a number of reasons. One's body position is at the moment tracked with this thing. Of course, since it's just a glove, you can only track hand position, not the position of your whole body, using these magnetic sensors that are deleterious to organisms like us with nervous systems, but they're the best kinds of things available nonetheless. So these blue cubes, 2 of them are capable of tracking XYZ position and roll, pitch, and yaw 60 times per second. These are receivers. The transmitters are up there. They're made by a company called McDonnell Douglas, used for tracking the position of heads in fighter pilots. They're 10 years old. They've been around for a long time. So these cubes are letting you sense their position and orientation 60 times per second. One is sensing the position of the hand, and this other one gets stuck on top of the helmet here, which is currently only semi-operational. The idea of this is to present the image to the person's eyes in such a way so that when you turn your head, you continue to see the world. There's a backlight that I stole from my previous job, and a couple of consumer quality LCD screens in there run by these little Magnavox units. One of the things about all this stuff is you can really go out and buy these things in your local hobbyist store and put them together on your kitchen table. It's really pretty straightforward stuff. So, The graphics boards generate the images in stereo. One goes to each eye. I'm currently working on lining up the images and things like that, so unfortunately you can't really effectively stick your head in that today. But I can give you sort of a demonstration of what it looks like with the two screens representing what you see in each eye here, although I just ran out of batteries and have to find another connector to actually get another screen working and so on. Lots of fiddling around with this stuff. Of course, the metaphor, of course, is putting yourself, your body in this space where the only part of your body that you can really see is your hand, because that's the only thing that's tracked at the moment. Oh, I forgot to mention, finger position is also tracked with these 10 flex sensors on the joints. This glove is made by a company called VPL down in Redwood City. You can move around the space, but you can't move very far. First of all, because you're connected by these cables to various things. It'd be nice to have it wireless. And secondly, because you get tired if you walk too far. So the other little gizmo here, which isn't fully connected yet, is a 6-dimensional trackball. The idea being it's like joystick, except you can move not only in XY space, but also lift it and drop it to move up and down. And this thing also can sense rotational torques. So just like when you have to drive a long distance, you don't walk, you take your car. When you have to move a long distance in cyberspace, you can fly with this thing. Although you'll see how viewpoint changes as I move this, which you recall is on top of the head, and you can imagine how one could also control your position for longer distance travel here. One very exciting thought about all this stuff that nobody, as far as I know, has yet managed to materialize is putting multiple people in the same space at once, giving you an appliance that's a telephone as well as a television and a vehicle. Okay, it's waking up the glove. Again, remember that when you're wearing the helmet, you don't have a keyboard in front of you, so any controls you wish to specify or have manipulate your world have to be gestural. So for example, the initializing gesture that lines you up in the space, whoops, sorry, this thing being more or less on top of my head is to make a fist. And there's the world, and there's my hand in it. So let me pull my eye viewpoint back a little bit. There's the world in stereo. My hand is in there somewhere. We don't have interaction built into it yet. That's one of the next phases. But of course, with the finger flex sensors, then the fingers move. So one can imagine, notice that as I move my eye, of course, I'm moving around the model. So I'm moving the hand, and the hand is moving with respect to the model. And if I say want to get closer to the airplane, I just take my eye and just move closer. The scaling is a little bit peculiar at the moment, so let me back out. Let me look to the right by swiveling my eye to the right. There I am, swiveling to the right. If I tilt my head up, look up, there I am, looking up at the top plane. The scale's a little bit wrong also in the sense that these should be objects in the world. You'll notice as I move my head about a foot, I'm moving like substantially with respect to that stuff. I'm moving real fast, and so scaling has to be corrected. Of course, the control, one can use a variety of gestures. They don't do anything at the moment, but you can. And of course, the ever classical. Anyway, this gives you the idea. Real-time motion around these bodies. Eventually using the hand to interact with them. Suppose you want to pick up that, well, you just pick it up. So get someplace where you can see it, find out where your hand is, move your hand over to it, somewhat clumsily at the moment, back off, and pick it up. But of course, it doesn't move at the moment. So that's where it's at today, here. And I mean, there's tons to be done. One problem, of course, being technologies like the liquid crystal screens in there. You're seeing a better picture here on the monitors than you actually see through those small screens. Although it's decent, and the motion is really a crucial factor of this. You can give up a lot of resolution, you can give up a lot of things to have that real-time motion, move around and see things around you. So that's the world here today.
For a lot of people, their first perceived experience of cyberspace, what they believed was a very primitive form of C-space, is the little 5 seconds of show stacks in the Knowledge Navigator 1 video, right? Where suddenly there are your stacks in 3D on the screen. You say, ooh, I could take a walk. I could take a walk through my data, through my phone book.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the problems of the spatial metaphor in navigating hypertext. This is what I deal with day to day. Okay, it's sort of halfway between here to there. It's really useful when you're trying to get a very sort of distant overview or as sort of a micro view for somebody that's naive with respect to that. You know, you've got a very small chunk of information. The trouble is you get into load very quickly. What if there's 2,000 thingies instead of 20 of them neatly arranged? In fact, there were some experiments down at MCC, the big computer consortium down in Texas, doing something they called SEMNet, which in fact had thousands of nodes represented with all the arcs. And you know what? You spent more time fiddling with the damn knobs on the user interface than you did dealing with the information. That's the problem. You're dealing with a false problem space, a false metaphor. At that point, you don't want to diddle with the knobs and fly around. You want magic. You want it here, now.
I don't know how many of you have seen the Apple Knowledge Navigator video, but John Scully's vision of the future of HyperCard does involve the ability to move around and navigate through stacks in 3 dimensions and simply touch a particular card and locate it that way rather than the inevitable 2-dimensionality of the current version of HyperCard.
There's going to be a neat little talking man in a window with a bow tie, or is it going to be cyberspace, or is it going to be something, an extension to the Finder? And that again is something, it's up to the user. What's going to work well for you? What's going to work well for you given a particular task at a particular time? Because people learn, people's tasks change.
I feel a little bit questioning when I hear all these wonderful projections about cyberspace. I think there's a real tendency for us to overestimate our power, What we've got, I've got a chip like this big, and like a puddle, if you look at the number of particles in it, the number of interactions. And also keep in mind that we've evolved over like billions of years, really, if you count the whole prebiotic evolution on Earth. As this is like, or at least, hundreds of millions of years. And so how quickly I'm going to evolve something in there that's going to be in any way comparable to myself is, it's not very clear.
So I can jack in. I think it'd be kind of neat. I'll sign up for it. It'd probably get things done for me faster, give me some interesting experiences. What would it end up looking like? Well, I'll make an argument that maybe the spatial metaphor is training wheels, okay? Let's go way out. Let's suppose that you do this to kids while they're still developing their nervous systems, okay?
Right.
And if you keep up on developmental neurology, it's sort of wired after birth to respond to sensory patterns, okay? What if the computer is a sixth sense? Literally, quite literally, you grew up with it.
Right.
Its interactions trained your nerves. Who the hell's to say it's spatially metaphorized? Probably not. Okay, what's it going to look like? I don't know.
And also the thing with cyberspace, I mean, sure, you can put on the goggles and you can look at the trees, but you can also take them off and you can go into a park and there's much more, because you can turn the ground over and there's worms in there. And, they haven't bothered to program the worms in the cyberspace. I mean, to sum it up, God has the budget.
Don't believe what you read about all this stuff in the near future. Just like expert systems became very fashionable and then fell out of favor because they didn't live up to their expectations, so I expect that this sort of stuff will be overblown, overhyped. People will tell you, you can turn your body into a lobster and build crystal castles and things. Well, not quite yet. I mean, the technology that gives you kind of rudimentary, stylized, CAD-like drawings in real time is almost there. The idea of, really ornate, realistic scenery in real time isn't quite yet.
Personally, to me, the ideal paradigm of an information system is a globe. Doesn't say good morning, doesn't call you by your name, it's just there, you look at it, you turn it, you move your head around it, get in closer. And Edward Tufte, he and I agree about a lot of things, except that he's anti-computer, but he basically said, the most information, you want the most information you can see, and you want the interface to disappear, as it were. You don't want any intrusion, and that's how I feel about a social interface. Social interfaces are particularly obnoxious because you have a social intrusion rather than merely a mouse intrusion.
What would you say of let's say
mouse intrusions are bad enough.
How do we extend from that to more initiative coming from the computer and do it in a very non-obtrusive way? Used to be a lot of initiative on the part of computers. They asked the questions, you supplied the answers, and you did it in rote lockstep. And that, we've gotten away from that. We've gotten to the point where the user really is in control, at least if we keep the technology pounded down to the right level. One of the challenges now is how to unobtrusively let the machine make those suggestions, volunteer information, without getting obnoxious about it.
What about a system in which you go to it and you say, I'd like to...
I don't want anything that I say.
You would say it to...
No! I want to point.
You don't even want to talk to the system?
I fucking don't want to talk to it.
Getting this off?
Yeah. The idea of having to talk to a goddamn computer is so infuriating to me.
You wouldn't want to ask your questions then either.
No,
No
I want to
doubt.
explore. Every question can be better answered, better asked by a graphical manipulation.
And Foucault says that who controls the screen controls society, right? And ABC, NBC, CBS control the screen, and the people who do these programs. Our aim is to give the individual student the power to change the screen.
People who want to build super gods and successors to humanity are of no interest to me. I want my grandchildren to sit sipping wine and eating strawberries and not bowing before some machine.
One of the great communicators of our time is a woman named Elizabeth Taylor. And I don't know her, but I had the fortune once of spending a few moments with her at a wedding of her son, who was a good friend of mine, Michael Wilding. And I was sitting on a couch, and she was undoubtedly drunk and undoubtedly had some sort of pills. And I'm sitting next to Elizabeth Taylor. It's my chance to exchange a lot of information. And she did something to me that taught me a lot about communication. I mean, I'm a PhD, and I've written 26 books, and how many books has she written, you know? She came up to me, and she put her lips on my ear, and she said, "Boodle, boodle, boodle." And I felt 747's information. I don't want to be my brain surgeon.